My name is Michael Turner, 46 years old, 11 years with Houston Freight Alliance. Last Thursday, I walked into the boardroom with the dust still on my jacket from flying back early. Just hours before, I'd signed the biggest deal of my career, $20 million locked in with Western Steel Corp. The CEO shook my hand, cameras flashed, the team cheered. And then, silence. In that oak-paneled room, the air felt heavy. Faces I once trusted wouldn't meet my eyes. My so-called colleagues stared at their phones, their watches anywhere but me. Then came the words, cold, sharp, final. We've decided to move in a different direction. You're being replaced. Someone with better connections will take over your accounts. I froze. Better connections. After a decade of loyalty, after nights I spent away from my family, weekends, sacrificed friendships, built one handshake at a time. I realized then it wasn't about loyalty. It wasn't about trust. It was about power. I looked at their polished smiles, their empty stares, and I felt something shift inside me. Not desperation, not fear, something colder. They thought they had cut me out, but what they really did was set me free. Because now every ounce of betrayal, every scar of silence, every late night they stole from me, I was about to turn it all against them. If you've ever been betrayed like this, stay with me. And if you want more real revenge stories, subscribe now. Because what happened next, they never saw coming. My name is Michael Turner. I am 46 years old. And for 11 years, Houston Freight Alliance was my life. When I joined, it was nothing more than a struggling local carrier in Houston, Texas. Old trucks, leaky warehouses, a payroll that barely cleared each month. Most people wouldn't have touched it, but I did. I believed in hard work. I believed loyalty mattered. And I believed if you treated people right, they would trust you back. So I did everything. I drove across states just to shake a hand. I spent weekends in motel rooms chasing clients no one else cared about. I answered midnight calls when a shipment went sideways. I wasn't the smartest man in the room, but I was the one who never stopped answering the phone. Within 5 years, I brought in accounts no one thought we could land. Western Steel Corp, Morrison Industrial, Valley Energy, clients who trusted me because I showed up when no one else did. Within 10 years, Houston Freight had doubled, then tripled in revenue, from 30 million to more than 100. And everyone at the company said the same thing, Mike, you built this. I thought that meant something. I thought it bought me security. But loyalty is only loyalty until someone with better connections walks through the door. And that's when I learned what you build with sweat and trust can be stolen in one cold afternoon. The day it happened, I walked into the boardroom still smelling of jet fuel. I had flown back early from Dallas after finalizing the last signature on the Western Steel deal, $20 million locked in. I thought I would walk into applause. Instead, I walked into silence. The room was polished oak and glass 10 executives lined around the table. Faces I had laughed with at company parties. Faces I had toasted with when we hit our first 100 million. But that afternoon, not one of them looked at me. Greg Sanders, our CFO, tapped his watch like the minutes mattered more than I did. Carla Ruiz, head of operations, stared at her fingernails as if they held the secrets of the universe. Even my assistant Linda avoided my eyes when she slid the printed agenda in front of me. That silence was louder than any words. It was the silence you hear before a verdict. Then the CEO cleared his throat. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Michael, we appreciate your contributions. I froze. Those words, that tone. It's the kind of voice you use when you're about to put down a loyal dog. I glanced around the table one last time. Not a single hand moved. Not a single face softened. 11 years of loyalty. 11 years of sacrifice. And now, I was just another name on their agenda. The boardroom door opened, and in walked Ethan Cole. Tall, expensive suit, smile sharp enough to cut glass. I had seen him around the office for weeks. The so-called strategic consultant, Harvard MBA, son of Richard Cole, a shipping magnate out of New York. Now he walked like he owned the place. The CEO gestured toward him, still wearing that corporate smile. Michael, meet Ethan. He'll be taking over as Director of Client Relations. Effective immediately. The words landed like a blade between my ribs. I stared at Ethan. His handshake was firm, calculated, exactly 3 seconds long. A performance. Behind him, the board members finally looked up, suddenly alive, nodding, smiling, eager to show loyalty to the new blood. That's when I understood. This wasn't sudden. This had been planned. Every meeting I hadn't been invited to, every after-hours light under the CEO's door, every question Ethan asked me about my clients, pretending to learn the landscape. It had all been preparation, and I was the mark. For a moment, I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was so damn predictable. They wanted Ethan's pedigree. They wanted his family name. They wanted his connections. My decade of sweat of nights on the road of trust, built one call at a time, meant nothing. I shook his hand anyway, and in that silence I made a promise. They might crown him their golden heir, but I'd make sure he paid for it. The next morning my phone buzzed. It was Linda, my assistant of 8 years. "Mike, I'm so sorry. They told me to pack up your office, 2 hours. Then security changed the locks. I drove downtown anyway. The building looked the same as it had for 11 years. Steel glass banners with slogans about trust and growth. But the guard at the front desk wouldn't meet my eyes. My badge blinked red against the scanner. Access denied. That's when I saw it. A cardboard box by the reception desk. My box. Inside a family photo, a broken fountain pen, business cards stacked like gravestones. All that was left of more than a decade. I picked it up. No one said a word. The receptionist pretended to type. 2 young analysts whispered in the corner, not daring to look at me. Walking out with that box felt heavier than any contract I'd ever signed. At home, the silence was worse. No buzzing phone. No emails. Just the hum of the fridge and the echo of betrayal. I set the box on the kitchen table and stared at it for hours. 11 years of loyalty reduced to cardboard and dust. For a moment, I almost broke, but then something hardened inside me. If they thought locking me out meant the end, they had no idea what I was about to build next. The silence in my kitchen was broken by a vibration on the table. My phone lit up with a name I knew by heart, David Lee, CEO of Western Steel Corp. I answered, "Mike, thank God. I've been trying to reach you. Some guy named Ethan Cole called this morning, said he's taking over our account." David's voice was sharp, almost angry. "I told him to go to hell. We signed with you, not some silver spoon consultant. What the hell is going on over there?" I took a breath. For once, no corporate spin, no half-truths. I told him everything. The board, the betrayal, the locks changed, the golden heir with better connections. For a long moment, David didn't speak. Then he let out a low growl. Unbelievable. "After all you've done for them? Mike, listen to me. Western Steel stays with you. I don't care what Houston Freight says. If you go independent, we're your first client." I gripped the phone tighter. My chest burned not from pain, but from something I hadn't felt since that boardroom door slammed shut. Hope. When we hung up, I sat there in the quiet again. But it felt different now. The betrayal still stung, but under it was something stronger. They thought I was finished. But if Western Steel believed in me, others would too. That call didn't just change my day. It changed the war. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house was too quiet, like betrayal still echoed through the walls. I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where my cardboard box still sat half open. I grabbed a pen, tore a page from a notepad, and stared at the blank sheet. For a while, nothing came. Then, almost without thinking, I wrote 2 words. Turner Logistics. It looked small on the page, just ink and paper. But as I stared at it, I felt something shift. I sketched lines under it. A few notes. Western Steel anchor client. Linda operations lead if she says yes. 3 drivers I trust. Piece by piece, it started to look less like a dream and more like a plan. But the doubts came too. I didn't have deep pocket investors. I didn't have family connections in New York like Ethan Cole. All I had was loyalty from people who trusted me, not the company. I leaned back, rubbed my eyes, and whispered to myself, "One wrong step, and they'll bury me alive." Still, I couldn't stop. I kept writing until the page was filled, then reached for a napkin when the paper ran out. By the time the sun came up, there were sketches everywhere. Contracts, names, numbers, ideas. Turner Logistics wasn't real yet, but in my mind, it had already been born. And once an idea is born, there's no going back. By Monday morning, the first blow landed. Not with fists, with lawyers. Emails started pouring in thick legal letters stamped with Houston Freight's logo. The message was clear. Any client who follows Michael Turner will face breach of contract lawsuits. Damages up to full contract value. I called David Lee at Western Steel. He was furious. They're threatening 18 months worth of payments if we leave. My boards rattled Mike. They're scared of the fight. By noon, 3 more clients called with the same story. Morrison Industrial, Valley Energy, Red Hawk Shipping, each one saying the same thing. We trust you, Mike, but we can't afford a legal war. I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. I wasn't fighting Ethan anymore. I was fighting an entire machine, and Ethan knew it, because later that day I got a call from him. Smooth voice. Too calm. Mike, you really should stop making promises you can't keep. These clients don't belong to you. They belong to us. I wanted to yell, to curse, to tell him he hadn't earned a damn thing. But I didn't. I just listened. And when he finished, I said 6 words. We'll see whose loyalty lasts longer. I hung up, staring at the napkins and notes spread across my table. My plan was fragile. My allies were wavering, but I wasn't backing down. Not now. Not ever. That night, just as I was staring at the pile of napkins on my kitchen table, there was a knock at the door. It was Linda Brooks. She looked exhausted, eyes red, hands trembling slightly, but in her arms she carried a thick manila folder. Mike, she whispered, stepping inside. I couldn't let them get away with this. She set the folder down and slid it toward me. Inside were copies of internal memos, board emails, even financial projections. One memo dated 3 months earlier stopped me cold. Succession plan. Remove Turner before end of Q4. Replace with candidate of superior family connections. Concerns over personalized client relations dependency risk. I read it twice, 3 times. My stomach tightened with every word. They hadn't just fired me. They had been planning it for months. Every move, every word, calculated. Another document showed profit forecasts how Houston Freight would renegotiate my contracts once I was out. Less service, higher margins, more profit for them. I felt heat rising in my chest. Betrayal wasn't an accident. It was strategy. Linda's voice broke the silence. I made copies before they walked me out. You weren't supposed to see this. For a moment, I couldn't speak. My throat was dry. Finally, I looked up at her. Linda, you just handed me their playbook. Her tired smile said it all. And in that moment, the war stopped being one-sided. Linda wasn't finished. As I closed the folder, she reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. Her hand shook slightly as she unlocked the screen. Mike, she said softly, there's one more thing. She tapped play. Static crackled, then the unmistakable voice of Richard Bloom, CEO of Houston Freight, filled the room. Turner was useful for building the business, but clients trust him more than they trust us. That's dangerous. Loyalty should flow up, not down. It's time to cut him out before he becomes a liability. My chest tightened. Hearing it in his own voice was worse than reading any memo. Then came Ethan's voice, smooth and cold. My father dealt with the same problem. Sometimes you have to cut out the cancer, even if it hurts short term. I froze. Cancer. That's what I was to them. Not a partner, not a builder, a disease to be removed. Linda stopped the recording. The silence afterward felt heavier than the words themselves. I stared at the phone, my hands curling into fists. The betrayal was no longer just a suspicion, no longer just documents, it was proof. Proof I could use. Finally, I'd looked at Linda. My voice was steady, colder than I expected. They think loyalty flows up fine. I'll teach them it flows both ways. For the first time since that boardroom, I felt something sharper than pain. I felt resolve. By Tuesday morning, I knew I couldn't fight alone. Houston Freight had lawyers' money and Ethan's last name. But I had something they didn't. Trust. And there was one company in Houston that had been chasing my clients for years, Velocity Cargo. Smaller, hungrier, and most importantly, unafraid of taking on Houston Freight. I dialed the number of their CEO, Marcus Reed. He picked up on the second ring. Turner, he said, his voice sharp. I've been waiting for this call. We met that afternoon at a quiet diner off I-45. No suits, no boardrooms. Just 2 men in a booth, coffee between us. I laid it out plain. Marcus, I bring you $20 million in new business within 60 days. In exchange, I want equity, autonomy, no interference. He leaned back, studying me. Big promises, he said. Big leverage, I answered. I pulled out my phone and showed him messages from David Lee and others' clients ready to move the moment I had a landing spot. Marcus's grin spread slow, like a man who'd just been handed a winning card. "You got yourself a deal, Turner." We shook hands across that booth, and in that moment, the war shifted. Houston Freight had replaced me with their golden heir, but I had crossed enemy lines, and now I had an army of my own. By Wednesday morning, I had a new office. It wasn't much, just a rented floor in Velocity Cargo's building with secondhand desks and a half-working coffee machine, but it was mine. Linda sat across from me, phone in hand, her eyes sharper than I'd ever seen. "You ready?" she asked. I nodded, and the calls began. First was David Lee at Western Steel. He didn't hesitate. "Mike, we're in. Send the papers." Next was Patricia Hall from Valley Energy. Her voice cracked with relief. "I was waiting for this. Houston Freight's been bullying us ever since you left. We're done with them." One by one, the dominoes started to fall. Morrison Industrial, Red Hawk Shipping, even smaller outfits I hadn't thought would take the risk. By Friday evening, 6 contracts were signed. 6 major accounts worth millions moving from Houston Freight to me. Every email confirmation felt like another nail in the coffin I was building for Ethan and Bloom. But there was something deeper too. It wasn't just business. It was personal. These weren't names on spreadsheets. These were people I'd driven across states to help. People whose crises I'd solved at 2 a.m. people, who trusted me, not the logo on their invoices. And now their loyalty was my weapon. I leaned back in my chair, exhausted, but alive. The war wasn't over, far from it. But for the first time since that boardroom betrayal, I was winning. One client at a time. It was barely 8 a.m. Monday when my phone rang. The caller ID froze me for a second. Richard Bloom. I let it ring twice before answering. Michael, his voice cracked, stripped of the polished confidence I once knew. We need to talk." I said nothing. He rushed on. 18 million lost in 6 weeks. Clients are walking out the door. The board is demanding answers. Ethan, he's not managing them. He's driving them away. I leaned back in my chair at Velocity Cargo, staring out the window. From here I could see their glass tower across downtown. Fewer lights were on these days. "Michael, listen." Bloom's tone turned desperate. "Come back, name your price. We'll restore your position, increase your salary, give you a seat on the board. Just help us." For a moment I let the silence hang. The same silence I had faced in that boardroom when no one would meet my eyes. Finally I spoke. "You already paid my price, Richard. In full. When you locked me out, when you crowned your golden heir, when you called me a liability." He stammered. This is insane." "No," I said, voice calm and steady. "This is business, nothing personal." I hung up. For the first time in months, I felt lighter. The betrayal that had broken me was now breaking them. 2 months later, the headlines told the story better than I ever could. Houston Freight Alliance acquired by East Coast Holdings. I sat in my new office at Velocity Cargo, the same view overlooking downtown Houston, and held the newspaper in my hands. The photo showed Bloom shaking hands with executives from New York, his smile tight, hollow. They called it a strategic acquisition. I knew the truth. It was a fire sale. They hadn't survived my departure. They had bled out. Linda stepped into my office holding a stack of resumes. 6 more of their warehouse crew just applied. Hard workers, good people. They don't deserve to go down with Bloom. I nodded. "Bring them in. We'll find them a place." Because revenge wasn't just about watching Bloom fall. It was about saving the ones he abandoned on the way down. That evening as I drove home, I passed their old tower. Half the lights were dark. The parking lot nearly empty. The same building that once locked me out now stood like a hollow shell. For a moment, I felt the old anger rising again. The betrayal, the humiliation, but it faded. Because the best revenge isn't anger, it's success. And every window of that dying tower faced mine, forcing them to watch me rise. I rolled down the window, let the cool Houston air fill my lungs, and whispered to myself, they thought loyalty was weakness. Now they know it's power. Looking back now, I realized something my father once told me was true. Work isn't just about a paycheck. It's about building something that lasts. For 11 years, I thought I was building that at Houston Freight Alliance. Turns out, I was just renting space in someone else's empire. The betrayal cut deep the boardroom silence. The cardboard box, Bloom's hollow smile, Ethan's arrogance. They tried to erase me like I was nothing more than a line on a spreadsheet. But loyalty doesn't vanish with a signature. Trust doesn't disappear when you change the locks. The clients I fought for, Western Steel Valley, Energy, Morrison Industrial, they reminded me that relationships are stronger than contracts, that people remember who shows up at midnight, not who wears the most expensive suit. And in the end, that was the difference. Bloom and Ethan built on power, on pedigree, on family names whispered in back rooms. I built on loyalty, on sweat, on trust that flowed both ways. When Houston Freight collapsed, it wasn't just because I left. It was because they forgot the simplest rule of business. You can't buy loyalty, you earn it. Today, Turner Logistics isn't just a company. It's proof that betrayal doesn't end your story. It rewrites it. And for me, revenge wasn't shouting or fighting or burning it all down. It was watching their tower go dark, while mine lit up brighter. So that's my story. I gave a company 11 years of my life. They gave me a cardboard box in return. But betrayal is never the end. It's only the beginning if you choose to fight back. For me, revenge didn't come with shouting matches or broken glass. It came in silence, in phone calls made one at a time, in trust rebuilt stronger than contracts, in watching their tower dim while mine lit up brighter across the skyline. If you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever been replaced, if someone ever told you that you weren't enough, remember this: loyalty is power. And when you own that power, no one can take it from you. Because in the end, revenge isn't about destroying them. It's about proving they were wrong every single day you rise without them. And if stories like this speak to you, if you want more tales of betrayal, loyalty, and cold justice, stick around. Hit that subscribe button. Join me here because every week I'll bring you another story, another fight, another reminder that when someone tries to write you off, you can always write your own ending. This was my revenge story. Yours might be next.